The UK property market just changed again. More supply, slower exchanges, price cuts everywhere, and a surge of pensioner sellers reshaping stock on the market. Today, I'm going through the data that actually matters and how to interpret it. And if you don't know me, I'm Will Gale, the founder of the British Home Group. Since 2013, my nationwide estate agency, British Home Sellers, has managed thousands of transactions worth over £5 billion of property sales. So I get a front row seat on how the market has been shifting and changing day by day. And my goodness, are things really quite fragile right now, which is really the point of why I'm recording this video. Especially with Rachel Reeves' upcoming autumn budget, the big question on all of our minds is, what is Rachel Reeves actually planning to do with property taxes this November? So let's quickly run through the theories that are out there, which I'll order from most likely to happen to least likely to happen in my view. So in my view, the most likely changes to happen are a freeze on stamp duty and tax thresholds. Stealth rise as inflation drags more people and houses into higher bands. We all pay more. A small capital gains tax rise on second homes and buy-to-lets, framed as fairness, adds revenue quietly. A minor inheritance tax tweaks, adjusting allowances or reliefs, not any sort of full reform. What I think is plausible to happen is this whole council tax revaluation or partial reform. So council tax bands were last set in 1991. Since then, house prices have changed a lot. So higher value homes will pay more council tax, in my view. National insurance on rental income, so treating rent like work income, which will hit landlords, of course. And this whole notion of a seller's stamp duty on properties worth over £500,000, I think they may trial this idea to tax sales, not purchases. What I think is unlikely to happen is capital gains tax being aligned with income tax rates, because the OBR have already warned in the past this will create a huge market freeze because it encourages people to hoard assets because of the tax liability rather than to sell them. And this idea of a mansion property wealth tax, I think, is politically quite toxic, unlikely in the budget. I think they'll aim to achieve the same sort of thing through the council tax revaluation I mentioned earlier. This sort of full land value tax replacing council tax, I think, as well, is just too complicated to roll out quickly. I guess we can all watch this after the budget to see how close I've got with my predictions, but that's what I think will likely happen. But let's explore what property market data is showing us is happening right now, heading towards the budget. Because right now, we're experiencing actually a slightly hotter market, despite how it might feel, but far stickier sales. So we've seen over 1.4 million properties listed for sale, which is a 3.7% increase on last year. Sales being agreed, sold subject to contract is growing as well. We've now passed over 1 million agreed sales in 2025, a 5.1% increase on last year. But it really shows how 1.4 million properties have been listed for sale, but only around 1 million have actually sold subject to contract. And that, to me, is the real problem, the balance between supply and demand. Completed transactions are growing. So far, 780,000 completions, a 12.8% increase year on year. And actually almost 3% ahead of 2019. So no question about it, the volume of transactions is growing, but the volume of people trying to sell is growing faster. But another key problem is the velocity of all of this. And what I mean by this is it is taking a lot more time for properties to sell. It now takes 77 days, the slowest recorded for 5 years. Time from sale agreed to exchange is 123 days, and that's actually still increasing. So an average from putting a property on the market to exchanging, on average, takes 200 days, almost 6 months. And this is a big reason why government wants to reform the housing sector, to speed up transactions, to try and unclog this pipeline. But also to make the process more efficient as well. So in Q3, fall-throughs totaled over 82,000. So although 1 million homes sell subject to contract, for instance, you're then looking at about 300,000 that fall through during the conveyance, which is obviously just terrible. So let's talk about why sales are stalling and the problem we have with price cuts and this bloated pipeline. Because so far, year to date, there have been 919,000 price reductions, the most ever tracked, a 16% increase on last year. So this is what I pointed out earlier. More people are trying to sell than are trying to buy. And that's putting downward pressure on prices. As a result, in much of the UK, there is an oversaturation of properties on the market. The properties that sell are usually those that are undercutting the competition. 38.7% of concluded sales listings had at least one price cut. For most of the UK, we're in a buyer's market, a complete flip from the seller's market we all witnessed over COVID. We're coming across, with British Home Sellers, my agency, so many people that bought over COVID and are now trying to sell, struggling to get the same price they paid. But let's talk about this regional split we're seeing, because the North and Midlands are leading the market, whereas inner London and the surrounding areas are really struggling, really lagging. Sales agreed figures are clearly growing in the East Midlands, Scotland, Wales, East of England, West Midlands, South West, and so on. But inner London, and actually Northern Ireland as well, is really struggling. You can see here the big variances in activity by city when looking at the same data. But there's also a massive changes around who is actually selling. So let's talk about the significant shift in retirement age home moving. Since the Q4 2024 budget, completed moves by pensioners has actually increased 26%, with more and more concern around tax, inheritance tax, even changes to how gifts might be taxed in the future. It's prompting more and more pensioners to downsize and plan how they're going to distribute their wealth. And if you're buying a family house, this is really your window, because more and more suitable stock is finally being released. This is important because building new homes is not actually financially viable across half of England. The cost of developing a new home has increased 17% faster than sales prices. So what this ends up meaning is the areas that are viable to build, to sell homes, tend to be where house prices are the highest. It's also why big corporates are focused on build to rent, because they're making the numbers stack up based on rental yield and how that will grow with inflation over time. Long-term property ownership, long-term rental yield is what makes property most attractive to corporate investors. Building to sell is actually really tough for developers right now. So to conclude, the headline is simple: more activity, slower pipelines, and a market that's really rewarding anyone who prepares properly. If you want my team to sanity check your pricing or strategy, check out my website. And if this helped, give it a like so more people see these numbers, not the noise. And I'll see you in the next video up here.